thank you very much. Firstly, Renato, thank you for inviting me to Sao Paulo. I've been to Sao Paulo once before to change planes. I just also want to say something before I start is, you know, I'm from Europe and I'm here to talk about Europe. But in a way, Europe's an old world, and I think what's very, very interesting and inspiring about listening to Andre is Bogota's a new world, and they've taken ideas created in Germany and innovated them. And I watched the growth of the green roof market in the United States of America and Canada, which virtually just did exactly what we did in the old world. And I think it was very, very interesting. And when I was invited to Bogota by Andre, and I think Latin America is one of the most interesting places to do green infrastructure. And you can take the best of Europe, but innovate. And I think actually I will have to talk to Andre about his guidelines, because I'm going to write guidelines over the next 6 months for Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And if you can make a green roof in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, you can make a green roof anywhere. And I think your categorization there, your process there, is actually very, very inspiring. Because one of the problems from where I come from is our guidelines evolved in the 1980s to satisfy the building industry. And we now live in a climate emergency where we need to look at how cities adapt. And it's not to criticize my Germanic-speaking colleagues, is our guidelines are very, very product-driven, and they're not performance-driven. And that will come out in my talk, and I will try and speak slowly. I get very excited. I talk in accents, so I've told the translators if I go too fast and they don't understand me, they can run out and tell me to be quiet and slow down. So I'm the president of the EFB, and following on from what Andre said, I am a wildlife enthusiast. And I started out as an activist to try and get wildlife put on roofs because they were building on post-industrial land. But in that, I've become a built environment specialist. I understand architecture, I understand roofs, I understand buildings. So I went bird watching yesterday in the big park here, and that's what I like to do. But when I get on a building, I have to think buildings. So I've started all my talks at the moment because this is a building near where I live. It was built in 1999. And it's a supermarket. It was, at the time, the most sustainable supermarket in the world. That's 1999. This, it was knocked down 2 years ago. This is what has been built on it. This is the most sustainable retail store in the world in 2019. So IKEA keep telling me. Now for me, and maybe for you, I'm 55, for anybody who's younger than me, what is going to be the most sustainable retail store in 2039? Because 20 years of my life trying to make London greener and also support things in Europe makes me think about the future. And the future is what's important. That's me in '89. And as it says on the screen, I'm now a president. So I went from a punk to being a president. I went from being an environmental activist to writing policy. And I always like to say this, you can't take the punk out of the president, okay? So if I misbehave, you understand, because I'm still an activist. Yeah? So I'm going to talk about these things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the why. Most of that, to be honest, has been covered by Andre. I'm going to talk about what my federation does, and also what connectivities we can have with Latin America and Brazil. I'm going to give you an overview of policies in Europe, and I'm also going to talk about what I'm calling green roofs of the future. And I'm very much where Andre is, in terms of my thinking, is about how we innovate for the future. Why green roofs and walls? Well, I'm going to talk from a European perspective And hopefully you can put that into a South American perspective and a Brazilian perspective. Yeah. So, basically, cities in Europe need to adapt to climate change. This is a fact. Most cities in the world know they have to adapt to climate change for all sorts of reasons. And urban green infrastructure is key. And Andre's explained that, and nature, because I'm a wildlife enthusiast, should be delivered. And nature actually is what we call nature-based solutions. Are actually key to delivering how cities adapt to climate change. And just looking at my continent, you know, I go to Brussels, to the European Commission. 75% of Europe will be living in cities. I suspect that's probably the same in Brazil. I don't know, I haven't looked at the statistics, but, you know, nearly across the world, they reckon by 2060, nearly 65% of people in the world will be living in cities. And so it's not a case of the countryside is for wildlife and the cities are for people. It should be the other way round. The cities should be for nature and the countryside should be for people. I might return to that. And, you know, we have lots of these, I can't remember, that's the heat waves. So we're getting a lot of heat waves in European cities. You know, my federation is based in Vienna. The average temperature in Vienna over the last 20 years, you know, it's getting unbearable now. We have cities which are designed for 36 degrees C. Vienna is not designed for 36 degrees. London is not designed for 30 degrees, you know. And, you know, this is a problem. And I'm sure it's a problem in many cities in Brazil. I haven't had time to research that. The other thing we have a lot of in Europe is we've got cities which are suffering from urban flooding. And nearly every city I've been into in the world is two things they say is increased summer temperatures, increased intense summer storms. And I was in Istanbul in 2010, and this is a true story, in Turkey, and I was talking to policymakers. A small valley in Istanbul had been developed 5 years before. They had an intense August summer storm. 300 people suffered in that flood. Only 2 people died, but 300 people suffered and were sent to hospital because the whole valley flooded in an urban area. So this is to say that basically cities are doing that. And these are just a series of slides I like to put in. It's just about the human scale. This is Copenhagen in 2012, inconvenience. If you hear about Copenhagen and climate change adaptation, it's because of that flood. That's Copenhagen. That's a bit of a problem. Yeah, this is Bolzano in Italy. I think that lady's got a big problem. She's trying to get home and she's stuck there. Bolzano suffers from really bad urban floods. And this is a terrible picture, and maybe Paolo will get me a good picture because this is Lisbon, and I can't remember what year it is. But I got this from the internet. This is the old town in Lisbon after a summer storm where mud just filled up all of the cobble streets in Lisbon. That is, I don't think that's inconvenience. I think that's quite tragic for an old city like Lisbon. And also, you know, you may not be aware of this, but we've just had a massive heat wave in Europe, and Paris is the interesting city. Because in Paris in 2003, 300 people died of heat exhaustion. And actually 1,500 people died in the whole of France. And what is interesting about Paris, they set a strategy in 2006 for the next heat wave. And it's quite interesting reading about it, because people have forgotten that Paris had set this strategy. And the heat wave came this year. And the strategy was not just about green roofs or green walls. It was a strategy of they would have these mobile water carriers to move out into the city, to give people water. They would set aside gymnasiums to take old people, to be cool. Really interesting what that strategy did. And so strategy, policy, can actually help us. And you know, these are serious things, you know. And, you know, I was told this on the plane by Paolo the other day. I did read this. You know, London is going to be as hot as Barcelona by 2050. It got in the news, but actually, I looked at some heat specialists to say it's not going to be that bad. But that's been in the press the last 2 weeks. So the European Commission, which is is my federation, we're part of Europe, is it wants to do all these things with its green infrastructure strategy for Europe, which is we need to deal with the heat waves, we need to deal with the summer storms, we have a process for net gain of biodiversity, and the UK is leading on that, and we need to give better health and well-being for our citizens. And they're the key parts of what is known as the EU Green Infrastructure Strategy. And I just did this morning early on, you know, I haven't done too much research, but I just Googled Sao Paulo climate change, and basically, from what I could read, it's just saying that nearly every single city in Brazil is going to get hotter. I don't know what your summer storms are like, but there you go. So, I mean, in the context of Europe, it's a global context, I think you'll find. And the key here is what we call, and it's globally being called, is nature-based solutions. And that's what this is all about, and the European Union has this massive research project called Horizon 2020, which my federation is involved in, which is looking at how we can develop nature-based solutions to meet the strategy. So, cities need green infrastructure urgently as part of the climate emergency. I need to tell you a little bit about my federation. There's my federation, we've got 14 members, and you know, I'm here through the link between my Portuguese association with Brazil to tell you what we do. And you know, our vision is to actually promote green roofs and walls as industrial products, as the market, but it's also to promote them in terms of how we adapt to climate change, and you know, various things like that, like most associations. And I'm very interested to see that you have formed this institute in Brazil, and hopefully through our Portuguese association we can have collaboration. One of the things we did, just to show you, is one of the biggest things we did over the last 10 years is we produced the first market report. And it's very, very hard to understand in Europe. I go to my French association members refuse to give data to each other because of competition. So it's really difficult to know what the market is in France. Yeah. And so, you know, to get our associations to come up with figures was difficult. The German Federation has been doing it since 2004, actually, and they write a report every year. And it's difficult to tell you my whole history, but I virtually sort of made the green roof industry in the United Kingdom, so for my ego, it's always good to know how the industry is doing. So in I'll come back to the UK. This is what we did in the market report. And this is about lobbying to the European Commission. Basically, we wanted to say, by 2030, every urban citizen in Europe would have 5 meters squared of green roofs and walls. Now that's a lot. And we wanted to put some monies to it because the European Commission wants an economy, because after the financial crash, it wants jobs. So these were blue sky thinking economics. And hopefully, we're getting near that figure. But at that same time, I got my green roofing companies, they all trust me. It's very interesting. I didn't have to do any legal processes. They all gave me their data because they trust me. And I did the first UK green roof market report. And we basically found that actually every year there's about a 17% increase. And when I talk about policy, we will explain that. Because markets will not increase unless you have policies and strategies. Because an investor's never going to put something up unless they're sort of made to. I think it's probably the best place. But I'll come to strategies. And I just want to put this out because I am not a nationalistic person, but when the UK does need celebrating, I will celebrate it. We are the only country in the world where our government has set up an organisation which is separate from government, but is there to police how the UK government is doing in terms of climate change adaptation. And there's been a bit of a problem because the Climate Change Committee has told the UK government in the last 2 months it is failing. And this is an interesting thing. But the reason why I put that in is the UK market report that I produce every year is now a climate change indicator in this report, which is really interesting that green infrastructure is now embedded in how the UK Climate Change Committee reports to the UK government. And I just bring that in, I think that's an interesting And also my federation at the moment, for our Austrians, are doing this global green market report, looking at green roofs and walls across Europe. And it's quite complex, but I'm highlighting it, and there's a website there. And one of the things we managed to do, because of my role, is to go to the London government, which is the Greater London Authority, and write a new report which leads into policy, because I wrote a report in 2008. So this is an update report. Now, there's a website down there. Why I'm highlighting this, and I've been doing this for 25 years, this is the most up-to-date green roof and wall report in the world. And it reviews all the benefits and all the policies around the world. So if you're interested and you can read English, it's there. But I'm using that to take me into policy, because one of the things we did is, look at cities around the world. And we're doing this metric that my German colleague, Andre, referred to, is in Germany they've started to look at how many meters squared per citizen. So this table there is based upon square meters of green roofs per citizen. And you know, you can look up there, and I'll explain this in a moment. You can take the list, and I think actually I should put Bogota up there, because I suspect with 300,000 square meters of green roofs, you're probably actually in the lead table, Andre, but whatever. But it's very interesting that actually most of the main cities are in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and I'll explain that in a moment. And I shall leave this with Renato if they want to share the PDFs to the So that's really about leading me into a policy approach. And I think it's very, very interesting talking to Andre what they're doing at a national level in Colombia, and also what they're doing at a city scale level. But you know, we're very fortunate in London, because in Europe we've had European policies for many years. I'm just going to, I can't review them all, but there's really two ways that things happen in Europe. And it's quite complex policy in Europe. It's even really doubly complex if you just look at Germany, because it's quite a complex process. But we'll just look at those, because the top 3 cities in the world are Basel in Switzerland, Stuttgart in Germany, and Linz in Austria. And Basel basically was a late starter of the 3. But in the late 1990s, it started to make policies to actually deliver green roofs. And it's interesting in Switzerland, they've actually had a federal policy to deliver stone shingle, we call it stones, on roofs since the 1930s. It's about fire protection. So, you know, they always had this tradition of protecting roofs. And in the early 2000s, they took money from the electricity company to actually pay people to put green roofs up. And that lasted for 3 years. And then after that, they made actually a building requirement that actually said you must put up green roofs, but you also must deliver for biodiversity. And that's key, because my history of green roofs is connected to Basel, because I was interested in biodiversity. And it has the greatest meter square per city. Basel is a very small city, but it has a lot of green roofs. You just have to go onto Google Maps, look at Basel, and you start, you know, after about 30 seconds, you're up to about 50, and you go, I can't, you know, forget it. Yeah. So that's Basel. So it was a relatively late start. Stuttgart is the second, and you know, there's a little map there. And I remember arriving in Stuttgart in 2004, and looking on Google Maps, they didn't have them in 2004, and just seeing I was surrounded by green roofs. Now they started in the late 1990s. And you know, it's a mandatory rule that you have to put green roofs up, but it's connected to a federal rule, which is about stormwater. And it's quite a complex German legal system, it's a federal system. And they also still have this fund that if you have an existing building, the city will give you 50% of the money to do it. You know, you have certain requirements. And then we go to Linz, and I just put a note in here because Linz is often said to be the first city to have a green roof policy in the world. It wasn't actually, it was Karlsruhe, which is in Germany. But Linz is quite famous because actually in 1985 it was the first city in the world, A, to make green roofs mandatory, but to set aside, I think it was originally €1 million a year to get green roofs put up. They've now since stopped that in 2016, they don't pay you anymore. but actually they still have this mandatory policy. So it's a mandatory policy with incentives, which is essentially the point of that. In most German cities, there are not incentives. It's just a mandatory policy, but you get a tax rebate from the stormwater system. Broadly, but it's very complicated in Germany. I could probably do a whole talk about German policy, but you would get bored. I brought Paris and Rotterdam I wanted to bring in because, did I skip Paris? No, I didn't. Paris, because of the heat wave in 2006, the mayor in 2008, as part of the strategy, is committed the city of Paris, not Greater Paris, to deliver 100,000 square metres of green space, a target of green space as an important part of their climate change plan. And in that, they provided funds for 100,000 square metres of green roofs and walls. And some of that was specifically for urban food growing. Now, I just want a context in Europe. Paris is an interesting city. It's a bit like Porto, but Paris is one of the biggest cities in Europe that did not get bombed in the Second World War. So it's an old city. So it's actually quite difficult in Paris to actually do a lot of this. Where you go to London or Berlin, we have lots of buildings built after the Second World War, but Paris is virtually an intact 18th century city. So it's got a unique issue if you look at it from a European point of view. Up until 2018, they'd already paid for 75,000 square metres. The thing is with Paris is there's also other regulations which are about stormwater, which also drive in green roofs in the suburbs, and again, it's quite complicated. The Ile-de-France, because the city of Paris doesn't necessarily get on with the Ile-de-France. So it's quite complex talking about the whole Paris situation in terms of their policy. But they've been delivering, and they're very, I'll put that particular picture in because that's on a gymnasium, an older children's school. It's in the 21st arrondissement. 21st arrondissement is the least green part of Paris. And when they opened this roof to the public, it was open 2 hours a day on a Saturday. It's now open 24/7, because it's become the biggest focal point for the community in the 21st arrondissement. And I don't talk a lot about public health and well-being because I'm interested in wildlife. That roof has had a significant impact on the social fabric of the 21st arrondissement. And also in a city like Paris, where there's a lot of ethnic minorities, it's become a place where ethnic minorities can share how they food grow, which in a city like Paris is quite important. Rotterdam is a very interesting city, and I've visited it twice now, and they have this massive program. But again, this program is being paid for by the city. And what's interesting about Rotterdam, and Rotterdam will lead into London, because Rotterdam is not a federal, the Netherlands is not a federal republic. It's actually a constitutional monarchy, so it's like the United Kingdom. So they can't make city planning law. They have to go with national planning law. It's just a unique thing for constitutional monarchies. And so they've had to do this, drive this by their own city budget to do this. And they're doing this for climate change. They're also doing it for stormwater because Rotterdam is in a delta and there's lots of problems with water. But they're paying for these green roofs to go up. But what was interesting, when they did a survey, they did an algorithmic survey of the city, they discovered that actually they'd actually got a third more green roofs than they knew about, because they were the roofs they hadn't paid for, that other people had put up through whatever processes. Now, I'm now going to leap to London, hopefully, because that's where I'm from. And again, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to say London's great, but London's unique in the United Kingdom, and it's actually unique in Europe, because London had a government set up in 2000. It's a completely new government, and it's unique in this sense, and it's often celebrated by people in Europe because of this fact that it's not a normal planning authority, it's a strategic planning authority. So its policies are about strategically delivering what the Greater London Authority needs. So it's quite unique in the world in terms of what its function is. And basically, the punk made the policy in 2008. And it's interesting because this is the power of policy. So we wrote this report, which I know this report actually helped Sydney make its policy, and also Melbourne, and a few other cities, 2008. And so in 2008 we made this policy. And the policy says the mayor expects. Now I don't know how anybody relates to that, because the Americans find this really problematic. It's not mandatory. No, it's not mandatory. It's expects. And what that means is the developer has to prove why they can't do it. And because of the nature of London, because it's a big financial capital, generally, the story I say, before 2008, I looked at a crane and said, I wish there was a green roof. After 2008, I looked at the crane and I said, there will be a green roof. Because the expectation just meant that actually nearly all major developments had green roofs. And so what happened actually, and this is what this update report was to do, is 10 years later, is essentially we've gone from virtually maybe 40,000 square metres of green roofs to 1.5 million square metres of green roofs, which gives us a density of about 0.17 metres square for citizens, which is actually below Rotterdam. But actually, we don't pay anybody to do anything. And we're one of the only cities in the world that does it purely because you have to. There's no incentives, and that's just the nature of the beast. And the way it works in London, we have a mayor, and he has control of big developments. And then we have 32 districts, and they're meant to reflect how the Greater London Authority does. So what's happened over the years, even small roofs, less than 100 metres square, are getting installed at a local level. And if you go to the report, and online I have maps and infographics for every single London district, and I have to tell you, I personally have mapped every single green roof in London. I personally drew the polygon. It's quite time consuming when you've got 1.6 million square metres of green roofs. And the other one, I originally mapped what we call the Central Activity Zone, and essentially this is to show that this is the centre of London, it's like downtown, it's a policy district, and actually every year since 2015, 17% increase in green roofs every year. And that's, the point of that is to say, it's not to say London's great, it's to say the power of a policy is actually what delivers the stuff. And what's going to happen now at a London level, I brought this in, and I think Andre was mentioning the green area factor too. I put that urban greening factor, there's different places call them different things. The original one was in Berlin way back in the late 90s. It's a really smart planning tool to increase green spaces in cities. And what's going to happen, there was originally in the London strategic plan a policy for green walls. That is now going to be superseded by our urban greening factor. And how many of you are actually planners or landscape architects here? Just any planners here? Any planners here? It's a planning tool which says, look, you've got to score a certain score, 0.5, in brief. If anybody wants to talk to me about it afterwards. And so you send in your landscape plan and you make a calculation. If it's 0.4, the city might send it back and say, well, you're 0.1 below what you need to be. And it works. It's a very clever tool. And I thought I'd put that in. And this is on coming to massive new development that's going on in London. Just as an example, is the green roof market in the United Kingdom, in London, is going to grow 17% every year. This will be using the green area factor, and most of those roofs will be greened because of the nature of this development, because of how the urban greening factor works. Now this is really where, that's all the I call that the boring stuff. I actually really love policy, but actually you don't get into the micro, I think you call it, which is actually, I like birds and wildlife. So this is just some ideas. This is, something's happening, no. This is a roof in the City of London, which is our business district. This roof is a planning condition, and it's been designed, and this is where we get into business. This has been designed, they had to do a green roof, so this company's going, right, let's make the green roof work for our staff. It's all about productivity of staff. Okay, but what's interesting about this roof is nobody but the staff can go on it. But the City of London have now made a new policy that any green roof, a park green roof, an intensive green roof, that is installed on a building now, should be open to the public, not private. And that's an interesting thing, because there's a lot of people working in the City of London. And so the first one of these, which is 120 Fenchurch Street, if you come to London, go to 120 Fenchurch Street, it's open every day, you don't need a ticket, you turn up, you're allowed to go on this roof. It's on a bank. Yeah? And it was opened in February, and it's by Latz and Partners, and you get some pretty good views. But I think, you know, for me, what's interesting about that's not about the City of London, it's about in cities. Let's make parks on roofs open to the public for the health and well-being of all citizens. Gated communities, not good. And the other thing that I wanted to do is, through my process, in Europe they're looking at a thing called biodiversity net gain, and London, the UK government is actually leading on biodiversity net gain. We have some property developers who've already decided to do net gain. And this is one of our big premium house developers. This is the poshest house developer in London. And I used to look at their pictures 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and it was all about what the insides of their houses look like. All their pictures to advertise their developments now are all about nature. And it's really fascinating, that change. And this is some of their, and they have an aspiration for every single housing development in the Berkeley Homes portfolio delivers biodiversity net gain. And this is just some of their projects. This is delivered biodiversity net gain. This is not led by the public sector, this is led by the private sector. And this is another one in downtown, and this is one I live near, I walk through it every day, and it's Kidbrooke Village, and they're doing things at ground level, at roof level, at wall level to deliver biodiversity net gain. And they're monitoring it and showing that to their shareholders. And it's very, very interesting that they're doing that. Sorry, Andre, confusing Portugal and mentioned about solar. Because we've got to be smarter. One of the problems in the old way we do things in Europe is we compartmentalise products and services. And they have in Germany been doing solar and green roofs for over 25 years. And it was my Swiss colleagues who came up with this idea that actually you could deliver better biodiversity because of solar panels. And so we've managed in London to put up what we call biosolar roofs. And Andre, absolutely correct. You've got the evaporation underneath the solar panel from the plants, increases the performance of the solar panel, and also because water runs off the panel, it increases the vegetation at the base of the panel. You've got shading, so you create microhabitats. But just to show you something, this is a bad. This is when it's done bad. And what often happens is, because of the way we treat services, solar is important because it's energy. And then what happens is they find that they've got a planning condition for green. So they just go, oh, that green stuff, we're shoving around the solar panel. Yeah? This solar panel doesn't make any energy because it's been done incorrect. And so there is a way of doing it that is important. Hopefully we'll go back. There are integrated processes to do this. This is the roof that I just showed you. This is an integrated system from one of the German companies, and it works very well. And this is by a big bank called the Standard Chartered big bank. And this is one which brings me a reference to Brazil. This is one I helped design. Was originally designed for biodiversity for the Olympics in London, and then they decided they hadn't met their solar target, so solar is more important than biodiversity. They tried to sell all the solar panels on my green roof, and I told them no, because I'm still a punk. But then they did this process, and it's really interesting this. It's met their solar target, and actually it's also met every single one of their biodiversity targets. Now, you may not know about London, the Olympics. Everybody talks about the Queen Elizabeth Park. That has only met 2 of the London Olympics biodiversity targets. That green roof has met all 15 of them. That makes me really proud. Now the thing is there also, a lot of the planners who were involved in London Olympics then went on to help design Rio Olympics. And I know this for a fact. And I know that there's a lot of green roofs delivered for Rio. I don't know how many there were, but I've seen in offices in London, LDA, big pictures of green roofs that were delivered for Rio. I know no more than that. So this is a solar construction that was I filmed actually during November, December last year. And it just shows you how the construction is. And because I'm interested in nature, and this was actually paid for by a philanthropist who wanted good biodiversity, we've created this topography and this process. And this is what it will look like when it's finished. This is what it's Switzerland. And it's just a sensible thing. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But what really fascinated me, because I think we also, and Andre, you may like this actually, I know Paolo loves it, is, you know, when I went up there one morning, and I sat there just as the sun was coming up, so we've got what we say is a high pressure over London overnight, and it's pretty cold in London. And I watched this roof. Now, it's a PDF, this is not my video. Sadly, I've got a video of this for 5 minutes of water dripping off a solar panel. I've asked people all over the world, how much water does a solar panel produce? And they go, I don't know, it doesn't matter. It produces solar energy. And I'm going, well, a solar panel on the coast in Portugal would collect a lot of morning sea and provide a lot of water. And I calculated that solar panel in January in London, each solar panel was producing 2 litres of water. I'm not a scientist, I just made a guess. And so we miss this connectivity that actually a solar panel is actually a fog catcher. And actually a solar panel on a green roof is also giving us another benefit. And I think that's something, you know, I would like to take forward with a bit more research. But you notice these things when you go around looking for them. Now, Andre also mentioned blue roofs. There's a big movement now in Northern Europe because of flooding is to store more rainwater at roof level, more than a green roof can. And so they're combining them with this blue roof system. But the thing here, what I like about this is there's 2 approaches to this that are going on. There's a couple of companies. This is a French company. And I have to say this company is the smartest I've come across, because there are very, very strong regulations for the amount of water you have to release in the Paris region. But it doesn't really tell you the story. This roof is a smart roof, and it's designed, it's Wi-Fi up, and it can predict when the summer storm is coming. So that actually when the summer storm is coming, a week before the summer storm is coming, it gets rid of all the water. So that everything is ready for the summer storm. And they're calling them smart roofs, and Amsterdam is the famous one for it. This is a copy of an Amsterdam one. And if you Google Amsterdam smart green blue roofs, there's a whole European program about how we can use technology to anticipate summer storms, and it's quite clever. And we wouldn't have had that ability 10 years ago because of the advances with technology. So again, this is saying, well, let's look at what we can do smartly with our roof systems. And I'll conclude this all at the moment. The other thing I've become really fascinated with is, I was introduced to this product 20 years ago, Carbonate. Now this is just one product. We've just put in the first carbon negative green roof. Why is that important? Well, a carbon negative green roof that is using materials that have stored carbon. They've actually extracted carbon. Carbonate per litre squared stores minus 173 kgs of carbon per litre cubed. So it is made to make a carbon neutral concrete block. But the waste of that, because they get a lot of waste, is a perfect green roof material. And even after it's travelled from the factory to the blending yard to London, it's still minus 50 kgs per square metre. Let's make our green roofs carbon sinks. This is where I'm really, my latest thing that I'm interested in. So to me, however we want to do it, whether it's for people or it's for wildlife, you know, really the smartest green roof of the future is one that provides solar power, stores lots of water, is carbon negative, and delivers full environmental net gain. And we're talking about biodiversity net gain in the UK and in Europe. They're talking about making regulations for environmental net gain. And I think that kind of relates to your thing at the end there. And I'm also really frustrated because I go and I get involved in big developments in London and they say, oh, give me a green roof specification. And I say like, yeah, but you've got some roofs nearby. Why can't I have the water off those roofs? Shut up, you're not a drainage engineer. I'm missing a point. I got involved in this project in Antwerp, and this is not about me, this is about thinking. And it's really good. This is a little children's, a kindergarten. It's for little children, yeah? And last summer in the heat wave, they had to close it down because it got too hot. So the Antwerp government are going to pay for it to be greened up. But what's really exciting, I worked with a retired engineer who'd already managed to get permission to take rainwater from neighbouring roofs to put onto the roof. We sometimes forget about this when we're designing things. You know, there's all these other roofs. Can I take that water? I want that water. Give it to me. And because I could do that, I could actually do something that I've only done 3 times before. You'll see some pictures. To create a wetland. Now, if you've got water, it's a temporary wetland. If you've got water on a roof, you know, that's even more cool. And I like wildlife, so I can create, and it is Belgium, it's Antwerp. It was marshland, I can create marshland on the roof, you know. There's an ecological context. So I can do this, but also I'm going to filter all the water from the solar panels into the wetland too. And then that water is a way of filtering the water before it goes into a rainfall harvesting tank. So we're connecting things together, and it's this thing that Andre was saying, let's make all the performance criteria so that we connect everything up. And so there's the solar panels. This is a bio-solar roof in London. We get the water from those, and we create these temporary wetlands. This is one in Switzerland. This is one I created on the Victoria and Albert Museum. I've just been asked to build one, to design one on the Science Museum in London. And this one here, you see the lead roof? Basically, there's 3 lead roofs that pour onto this. And we store in a huge amount of water that creates a habitat. Reduces the amount of water that goes into the drainage system, but significantly cools the local environment. That's just smart, because we're thinking about other parts of the building. And this is one, I took some people from Sweden, from our Scandinavian Federation 4 years ago to the last roof, and I went to Sweden this year and they say, hey Dusty, we built a wetland roof on a housing development. And they're very simple. There's nothing complicated about it. But people make it complicated. And that leads me, I haven't spoken much about green walls, and I'm coming to the end here, because actually, I know of only 3, actually I think the one in Santa Lea is actually, to be fair, but what we call 3 vertical rain gardens. This is one of the first in the world. Basically you can see, we've got a, I'll walk over it here. You can see the downpipes coming from the roofs above. That rainwater goes in the back of the green wall and irrigates it. That green wall, and you have to be honest when things go wrong, that green wall was installed in 2010. Never use any potable water. Last year we had a 4-month drought, and actually the wall died because we didn't have enough rainwater. It's now been reinvigorated. We've now had to connect something to say when we get a drought like last year, we will have to use potable water. But you live and learn. And I think green walls should not be horticultural bling. Green walls should be delivering environmental net gain. And this is what this wall does. There's one in Portland which does a similar thing. And this is quite a famous one in Europe, the Rubens at the Palace. What this does, it takes the roof runoff, stores it in a massive black tank, and then irrigates it. Again, it was built in 2012. It's never used potable water till last year's 4-month drought because we had a really significant drought in London. And it's again, let's connect using vegetation to store rainwater and not actually take water that could be used for other purposes. And I'm also very keen that we don't. There's a famous development in Potsdamer Platz in Germany. Nearly all the irrigation water for the whole landscapes in the Potsdamer Platz in Berlin comes from roof water. They don't import from potable. And we need to be thinking this smart. I think that's what you would call the eco-productivity, Andre, here, unconventional. So how do you summarise 25 years of your life? Policy is key. But what's often driven people, I know we've got the building people here, is a lot of green roofs are driven by building science, not environmental performance. And we really do need to focus on environmental performance rather than something that's lightweight or looks beautiful. We need to see green roofs and green walls as infrastructure. They are performing like pipes, electricity. We need to connect the whole of the building and think about the whole of the building. We try often to see green roofs as separate. Oh, there's your little roof, green it, there's your wall, green it. How does it connect? And I don't think it's just about, and I'm not challenging you, Alfred, that's not about the connectivity of plants and animals, that's the connectivity of the whole building and the whole infrastructure process. Yeah? And we should be delivering environmental net gain. And if they do, cities will be better adapted to climate change. The other thing is, it's a little point, and again, I hope Andre doesn't see this as negative. One of the things, I'm basically a wildlife expert who got into the built environment. We cannot restore environments through green roofs and green walls. It's the restoration. Yeah? We can replicate. Most of my green roofs designed for biodiversity are replicated. It's very difficult to do restoration. And there's a very, very important point here, because of a European psychology, pre-industrial, most of the conservation movement is obsessed with going back to paradise, the wilderness lost. We can't do that in cities. What we have to do is create the wilderness of the future that also delivers for biodiversity too, because cities will not go back to what they were before, but we can make them better places for people. And I'm sure you can in Sao Paulo, Florianopolis, Recife, Cuiabá, I always say wrong, I've been there, and Goiânia. Thank you very much. That's me.